At my mother's 70th birthday party, she announced she was handing over her entire estate and the leadership of the family business to my younger brother. I clapped in a show of approval. After the party, I handed my wife, Sarah, 2 Greyhound bus tickets. "Sweetheart," I said, "we're leaving for good. Take care of yourself." The dawn was barely breaking, and a low fog still clung to the branches of the dogwood trees in front of the house. I was already awake. The sound of a street sweeper's bristles, scraping against the asphalt, echoed in the morning stillness. It was an important day for our family, a grand celebration in honor of the 70th birthday of my mother, Margaret Miller. I, Jack, was the eldest son, and I fully understood the responsibility that rested on my shoulders. For the past 3 days, I had been running around, ordering a banquet from the most prestigious restaurant in High Point, North Carolina, the furniture capital of the world, hiring musicians, and sending invitations to relatives near and far, as well as to our company's business partners. My wife, Sarah, was just as busy, staying up late and waking up early, checking every gift bag for the guests, and fussing over every tablecloth. But even in that feverish atmosphere of preparation, I felt a chill run down my spine whenever I thought of my mother. "Jack, did you double-check the guest lists? Why don't I see Mr. Davis from the Business Association on here? What kind of unprofessionalism is this?" My mother's voice rang out from the living room, as sharp and dry as scraping metal. I hastily put down a stack of catalogs and walked into the room. "Yes, Mom. I hand-delivered his invitation last Tuesday. This morning, I called him again as a reminder. He said he'd be on time." My mother was sitting on an old, hand-carved solid wood sofa, holding a vintage locket in her hands. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the yard, where my younger brother, Kevin, was lounging in a hammock, playing on his phone, paying no attention to the workers, setting up the event tent. "But Kevin says Mr. Davis changed his cell number recently. You're the older brother, and you never share updated information with the younger one. If you keep up this stubbornness, one day you'll ruin everything." With that, my mother stood up and walked straight over to Kevin. I stood frozen in the middle of the room. Sarah came out of the kitchen and lightly touched my arm. In her eyes, there was sadness, but also unconditional support. I forced a smile to reassure my wife. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of carrying the family business on my back since my father passed away. But my mother remained the same. In her eyes, I was just a work machine, obedient, but with no inherent value. Kevin, on the other hand, the youngest son who had given the family a male heir, was a true treasure. Around 9 a.m., the guests began to arrive. Our old, yet imposing, house gleamed with decorations. Laughter, congratulations, and music filled the neighborhood. Dressed in a formal suit, I greeted guests at the gate. Every person who walked by praised Margaret. "You're so lucky to have an older son like him, so smart and enterprising, who single-handedly rebuilt the family business." In those moments, I would just nod modestly and thank them. But I knew that my mother, standing nearby, would purse her lips in displeasure upon hearing those words. While I was sweating profusely, greeting guests and directing the catering staff at the same time, Kevin appeared in a shimmering designer suit. He sauntered between the tables with a glass of expensive, aged whiskey, exchanging pleasantries with uncles and aunts. Our mother watched him with a rare tenderness. Wherever he went, she followed, introducing him to everyone as the future head of the family. "Jack, what are you doing? Just standing there. Go see what's going on, quickly. Table 5 is out of ice." Such a simple thing, and you're making the guests wait. My mother reprimanded me loudly while I was discussing an important contract for the next year's supply of oak with a partner. The partner looked at me, embarrassed. I blushed, apologized, and hurried to resolve the situation. The feeling of humiliation in front of strangers was bitter, but I was used to it. Since childhood, I always had to give in. If Kevin wanted a toy, I handed it over. If Kevin messed up, I took the blame so our father wouldn't punish him. And now, as my hair was beginning to gray, my mother continued to treat me like an irresponsible child, or rather, an unpaid employee. The party reached its peak. Platters filled with delicacies were carried to the tables. Festive music played loudly. I saw Sarah in a corner, holding our daughter, Lily, in her arms. The little girl wore a beautiful pink dress. Her big, round eyes watched her grandmother and the guests with curiosity. I wanted to go over and hold her. But at that moment, my mother called Kevin over. "Bring our Tommy to Grandma." Tommy, Kevin and his wife Jessica's son, was the apple of my mother's eye. She scooped him into her arms, smothered him with kisses, and then turned to the guests. "Here is the joy and pride of our family. This boy will continue the work of his father and grandfather. He will honor our family name." Lily, seeing her grandmother holding her cousin, toddled over and babbled that she also wanted to wish her grandma a happy birthday. My mother didn't even glance at her, making a dismissive gesture with her hand. "Go play with your mother somewhere else, Lily. Grandma is busy with your cousin. These children are always in the way." The little girl stopped, her lips trembling as she whimpered and hid her face in Sarah's legs. I watched from a distance, my heart tightening. A silent fury boiled inside me, but I held it back. I looked at the portrait of my maternal grandfather, Arthur, hanging modestly in the study. He was the only one who had ever understood me. He had taught me that a strong tree bends in the wind, but doesn't break, so it can bide its time. That day, I would bow my head in the name of filial duty, but I knew that after this party, everything would change. The celebration ended, and the guests departed. Only the closest family members and a few staff remained, cleaning up the mess, the smell of alcohol mixed with leftover food, creating a stuffy atmosphere. My mother sat majestically in the main armchair, a look of satisfaction on her face after the relatives' praises. Kevin and Jessica sat on either side, their expressions smug. I had just seen the last guest to the door and was about to get some rest when I heard my mother's voice. Sarah, Lily, and I entered the living room. "Everyone, listen to me. Today is a day of joy for me, and I want it to be joyful to the end," my mother began, her voice more solemn than usual. She pulled Tommy onto her lap, gave him a piece of cake, and then cast a glance at my wife and me. In that look, I saw coldness and calculation. In our family, traditions and the continuation of the bloodline have always been the most important things. Kevin may like to party, but he has one great merit. He has given this house a son. That is the greatest blessing of all. She stroked little Tommy's head. Sarah, standing beside me, tightly gripped the hem of her dress. I understood her pain. We had been married for 10 years and only had Lily. Sarah had gotten pregnant a second time, but due to overwork at the family company, she suffered a miscarriage. Since then, the doctors had said it would be very difficult for her to conceive again. My mother not only showed no sympathy, but used it as a pretext to criticize Sarah for all those years. "Mom, Sarah has also worked very hard." I tried to intervene. "But a daughter is like a sliced-off piece of bread. She gets married and belongs to another family. Only a son will remain to honor the ancestors and care for his mother in her old age." Kevin chimed in, his voice more mocking than defensive. His wife, Jessica, immediately agreed. "You're absolutely right, Mom. My husband and I, no matter how hard it was, made sure to have a boy to bring Grandma this joy. Not like my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, who just spend their days thinking about business. And the house feels so cold without the voice of an heir. It's sad." Meanwhile, Lily was holding a small doll. The little girl seemed to sense the tension and huddled against her mother. Tommy, seeing the pretty doll, ran over and tried to snatch it. "That's for Tommy. Tommy wants it," he yelled. "It's Lily's. Daddy just bought it for me," Lily said, clutching the doll tightly. My mother immediately shouted, "Lily, you're the older one. Why are you so selfish? Fighting with your cousin over a doll. Give it to him right now." "But Grandma," Lily sobbed. "I said give it to him. If you don't, you're going to your room. You have no business being a nuisance here." My mother jumped up, snatched the doll from Lily's hands, and gave it to Tommy. The boy laughed victoriously, while my daughter burst into bitter tears. Sarah quickly picked her up, her own eyes filling with tears. She said nothing, just gave my mother a slight bow, and silently carried our daughter upstairs. I stood there, my fists clenched so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream, to ask how she could be so cruel to her own granddaughter. But looking into my mother's eyes, I saw only extreme conservatism. "Jack, don't make that face," my mother said coldly. I'm doing this to teach her to yield. She's a girl. When she gets married, she'll have to know her place. And Tommy is our heir. He's entitled to privileges. I sighed, my voice dropping. Mom, I'm not talking about the doll. I'm just asking you to be a little fairer. Lily is your granddaughter too. She also needs her grandmother's love. Fairer? My mother laughed disdainfully. In this house, I am the ultimate justice. Whoever deserves more gets more. You're capable, you make money, but you couldn't give me a grandson to carry on the family name. That's your greatest sin. So, all my effort over the last 15 years, the sleepless nights over blueprints, the long trips to the most remote forests, searching for the best wood, the nights I had to drink until I was sick, to sign contracts, all of it was worthless, just because I hadn't fathered a son. Kevin sat with one leg casually crossed over the other, a look of complete satisfaction on his face. He knew that in this fight for their mother's favor, he had won without any effort. His trump card was his son, and he knew how to exploit our mother's preference to the fullest. I went out into the yard. The night wind blew in from the outskirts, bringing a cool freshness. I looked up at the starry sky. I remembered my grandfather, Arthur. When he was alive, he often took me to the garden. He used to say a man's life is like a tree. Some trees blossom abundantly but bear no fruit, and there are those that stand modestly in the shade, but their fruits are sweet. The most important thing is to live with a clear conscience, and fate will take care of the rest. At the time, I didn't fully understand his words, but now, standing by the house I had poured so much of my life into, I felt like a stranger, an outsider being pushed to the curb by the people closest to me. I took my phone out of my pocket and called an old friend who lived in Asheville. Mark, hey, how's that piece of land I asked you to look into? It's all set, Jack. I think the time has come. I ended the call. My soul felt heavy, but at the same time, I felt a certain relief. The plan I had secretly nurtured for so long was finally about to come to fruition. My mother wanted to give everything to Kevin. Fine, I would fulfill her wish. But what that everything truly meant, only my late grandfather and I knew. The next morning, the tension in the house had not subsided. After a frugal breakfast, my mother ordered everyone to gather in the living room for an important conversation. I knew this moment would come, but I didn't expect it to be so soon and so public. Relatives from both my father's and mother's sides were already there. My mother had notified them in advance to serve as witnesses. Familiar faces, uncles and aunts I had always respected, now looked at me with pity or curiosity. My mother sat in the place of honor. Beside her rested a wooden box containing important family documents. She cleared her throat, and the room fell silent. Dear family, be my witnesses, she began in a sonorous voice. I am getting old. My health isn't what it used to be. This business was left by my husband and our ancestors. My duty is to hand it over to worthy hands, to keep the flame of our family burning. She paused, her eyes scanning everyone before settling on Kevin. He had already dressed formally and looked very respectable, though he couldn't hide his usual lazy expression. Jack is the eldest son, and for all these years, he has worked very hard for the company. I acknowledge that, my mother said, but suddenly her voice became harsh. But he only thinks about money and work, and has forgotten his roots. This house needs an heir, someone to preserve the land, the house, and honor the ancestors. Kevin, my son, has given us Tommy, and that is the greatest blessing for our family. I stood in a corner of the room, my arms crossed, observing in silence. Sarah was by my side. I felt her shoulders trembling. Therefore, today, in the presence of all of you, I announce that this entire house, the ancestral lands, and the management of Miller Legacy Furniture will pass into the full control of Kevin, my mother declared loudly. A murmur went through the room. Whispers could be heard. My God, she's giving everything to the younger one. But what does Kevin know about the furniture business? But he has a son. For Margaret, that's what matters most. Poor Jack worked so hard for years, and now he gets nothing. My mother slammed her hand on the table. Silence, I'm not finished. Jack, for you and your wife, I will set aside a sum from my savings, so you have some starting capital. but this house and the company now belong to your brother. You will have 1 month to hand over all the files and bring him up to speed on everything." Kevin and Jessica exchanged glances, not hiding their triumph. Jessica quickly stood up. "Mom, you are so wise. We promise not to disappoint you. We will take care of you. And Tommy will become the true master of this house." I looked at my mother, then at Kevin. He looked at me defiantly, as if to say, no matter how good you are, in the end, you're just a salaried employee for me. All eyes were on me, expecting an explosion of anger, a furious protest, or at least a plea. But no. I took a deep breath, feeling a 1,000-ton weight lift from my shoulders, the burden I had carried for all those years. I walked to the center of the room. My mother looked at me, testing me. "Do you have any objections? And don't say I'm being unfair. I'm doing this for the future of our family." I looked her straight in the eye, and a faint smile appeared on my lips. I began to applaud. Slow but loud claps echoed through the silent room. "Congratulations, Mom." "Congratulations, Kevin," I said, and my voice sounded incredibly clear and calm. "I fully support your decision." Everyone was frozen in astonishment. My mother narrowed her eyes, visibly surprised by my reaction. "Are you serious? You don't hold a grudge against your mother?" "No, of course not." I continued with complete sincerity. "For all these years, I've carried the weight of the company, and to be honest, I'm very tired. Now Kevin has matured. He has an heir. It's his turn to manage the family business. Thank you, Mom, for giving me the opportunity to rest and dedicate time to my wife and daughter." I turned to Kevin and clapped him on the shoulder. "Kevin, the company is yours now. Work hard. Don't tarnish the family honor. If you have any questions, just ask. Although I think with your talents, you won't need my help." Kevin was taken aback for a moment, but then a wide grin spread across his face. "Come on, brother. You're embarrassing me. I'll do my best. You just relax, enjoy life." Sarah looked at me, and her expression of surprise gave way to understanding. She knew what I was thinking. The relatives began whispering among themselves, commenting that I must have gone mad, that they had taken everything from me and I was still applauding. But they didn't know. In the inner pocket of my jacket was the key to a secret safe deposit box at the bank, where the documents that Grandfather Arthur had personally given me before he died were stored. He had foreseen my mother's preference and Kevin's recklessness many years before. True wisdom does not fear fire, but gold in the hands of a greedy man turns to dust. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory. Hold on to the essence, not the empty shell. My mother, seeing how easily I agreed, seemed a bit disappointed. She had prepared an entire script to counter my resistance, but my docility aroused her suspicions. "It's good that you're so understanding. It's for the best," she said with some hesitation. "So, starting tomorrow, you'll begin handing over the accounting books to Kevin and the clients and the workshops. You have to accompany him everywhere and introduce him." "Yes, Mom, I'll do everything as you say." I bowed. I led Sarah and Lily upstairs. My steps that day were light. I knew that from that minute on, I owed this family nothing more. I had fulfilled my duty as the eldest son, yielding to the absolute limit. Now, my life would be in my own hands. "Sarah," I whispered to my wife as we entered our room, "pack our bags, just the essentials. We're leaving." Sarah smiled through tears of happiness streaming down her face. She had waited so long for those words. We looked out the window, towards the north, where the Blue Ridge Mountains awaited us. A new, quiet, and free life was opening up before us. And downstairs, in the living room, my mother and Kevin were still drunk on the inheritance they had just received, unaware that the most valuable thing there was already leaving that house with me. After my applause, the grand living room plunged into a sepulchral silence. The aunts and uncles, who normally loved to gossip about inheritances, now exchanged perplexed glances. They had expected to witness a grand scandal, a heated argument between brothers, or at least the bitter tears of my wife and me. But my calmness threw them for a loop. I clearly felt a new wind blowing in my heart. It wasn't the cold wind of loss, but the fresh breeze of freedom. For the past 15 years, every morning I had woken up feeling the weight of tons of wood, hundreds of planks, and the constant pressure to please my mother on my shoulders. Now, with a nod of my head, I had freed myself from it all. Jack, are you being serious? My mother broke the silence with a question full of doubt. She narrowed her eyes, now clouded with age, trying to find some shadow of resentment or falsehood in my face. You're not going to regret this? You won't go around telling everyone behind my back that you have an unjust mother. I smiled, a smile that I'm sure was the most sincere one I'd had in the last 10 years. Mom, I am completely serious. I'm genuinely happy that you've found someone you trust to manage the family business. And I'm glad Kevin has the opportunity to show what he's worth. I just hope our family remains united. That's all I ask. By now, Kevin had regained his confidence. He stood up, adjusted the collar of his designer shirt, and declared loudly before the relatives, "There you have it, uncles and aunts. My older brother is a man with a capital M. He understands everything, and that's why he's acting this way. I promise my mother and my brother that I will take Miller Legacy Furniture to new heights. You rest, brother. I'll handle all the difficulties." Jessica, Kevin's wife, didn't miss her chance. She ran to my mother and began massaging her shoulders. "See, Mom, I told you. Brother-in-law Jack and sister-in-law Sarah are the most sensible people in this house. Let them choose a quiet farmhouse in some little town and live in peace. We've got this." I looked at Sarah. She just gave a slight nod. We quietly withdrew from the crowd that was already beginning to surround Kevin to congratulate the new director. My steps on the oak staircase, the same one for which I had personally selected each plank 10 years earlier, felt incredibly light. That night, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by blueprints and samples of fine woods I had painstakingly collected. From a secret drawer in my desk, I took out a small, framed photograph of grandfather Arthur. He looked at me with his kind eyes, as if he had foreseen this day. Everyone in the house, including my mother, thought the strength of Miller Legacy Furniture lay in its name, its warehouses, and the capital my mother held. But they were wrong. In 15 years in the market, I had learned one thing. In this business, the most important thing is reputation and soul. And those things I had never allowed to belong to the company. They belonged to me personally, Jack Miller. Major partners from Germany and Scandinavia signed contracts with me because they trusted my instinct for wood, because they knew I would never pass off cheap particle board as solid timber. The best master craftsmen in the workshops stayed because I treated their families with humanity in difficult times. When I left, all of that would leave with me. My applause that day was not a sign of surrender. It was a farewell applause to a past full of shackles. I picked up my phone and sent a short text to my largest business partner. "It's done. The plan is in motion." Outside, I could hear the clinking of dishes. The cleanup was still underway. Kevin and Jessica were opening champagne and celebrating with my mother downstairs. They were celebrating the conquest of a sand castle, unaware that the high tide was already beginning to rise. I turned off the light and lay down next to Sarah. She turned and hugged me, whispering, "Are you tired?" "No, Sarah. I feel like a 1,000-ton stone has been lifted off me. Sleep. We have a lot to do tomorrow." I closed my eyes. In my mind, an image of a small property somewhere on the slopes of the Blue Ridge Mountains appeared, with vibrant roses and the sound of Lily's laughter. That was the true legacy I wanted to protect. Not even 24 hours had passed since the announcement, and the true faces of Kevin and his wife were revealed in all their ugliness. Early in the morning, while I was still enjoying the last few moments of peace with a cup of coffee on the porch, Kevin appeared with a grim look. The fawning attitude of the previous day was gone. In its place was the tone of an arrogant owner. He threw a stack of papers onto the table in front of me. "Jack, here's a list of the company's fixed assets. Mom told me to inventory everything. By the way, that pickup truck you drive is also a company asset. Starting tomorrow, you leave the keys with me. I need to get around for business." I drank my coffee calmly. "Fine. That truck has always belonged to the company. I'll give you the keys tomorrow." Kevin, seeing that I offered no resistance, pushed further. He walked around the room, pointing at objects. "And this antique sofa, too. Mom says it was bought with everyone's money. Since I'm running the house now, it stays here. When you move out, make sure you don't touch anything." Jessica came out of the adjoining room, holding an antique porcelain vase I had given my mother last year. She turned it over and pursed her lips. "It's very nice, but who knows if it's not a fake." "Jack, you've been in business for so many years, you must have saved up a good bit of money. The amount Mom gave you was very generous. Don't you start getting envious of our family." I looked at Jessica, then at Kevin, and my heart ached with pity for my mother. She thought that by handing the inheritance to Kevin, she was protecting it, but she couldn't see their bottomless greed and lack of vision. All they cared about was what they could touch. They didn't understand that for all these years, the family had been sustained by my sweat and blood. "Kevin," I said calmly, "everything in this house, from the smallest nail to the roof beam, you can have it if you want. I'll only take what strictly belongs to me and my wife. You don't need to be so defensive." Kevin gave a scornful smile. "You talk a good game, but I know you have all the client contacts in your head. Don't you dare try any tricks to steal my clients. If I see the company's profits drop, I'll tell Mom you're undermining your younger brother." I couldn't help but laugh. Kevin was just a big child in the business world. He thought clients were a flock of sheep you could lead anywhere just by taking the shepherd's place. Just do your job well. Clients are smart people. They only work with those who bring them value. The situation worsened in the afternoon. While Sarah was packing our clothes into suitcases, Jessica walked into the room without knocking, went straight to the vanity, and picked up Sarah's jewelry box. "Sister-in-law Sarah, Mom gave you this necklace for your 10th wedding anniversary, didn't she? I think you should return it to her. After all, you never gave this family an heir. It's not right for you to keep family heirlooms." Sarah froze, her face turning pale with humiliation. She was about to say something, but at that moment, I walked in and gently took the jewelry box from Jessica's hands. "Jessica, what my mother gave to Sarah belongs to Sarah. You have no right to decide anything. If my mother wants it back, she'll tell us herself. Now, please leave and let my wife pack." Jessica stomped her foot and, as she left, threw a venomous parting shot. "We'll see how long your nobility lasts. Let's see if you're still applauding when you're left with nothing." I closed the door and wrapped my arms around Sarah's trembling shoulders. "Don't worry, my love. The more they behave like this, the more certain I am that our decision to leave is the right one. One more day here, and we'd gain another scar on our souls." That same evening, Kevin threw another small party, inviting his card-playing and drinking buddies to celebrate his new position. Shouts and the clinking of glasses echoed through the house all night. My mother sat in the next room. Perhaps she was beginning to feel that there was something unhealthy in all that noise, but she tried to convince herself it was just youth and energy. Kevin didn't know that while he was getting drunk on his friend's flattery, I had already signed my resignation letter and prepared all the documents to hand him an empty shell, a company without experienced craftsmen, without trusted partners, and with a warehouse full of worthless material. That was the inheritance his greed had blindly accepted. I looked at Lily, who was sleeping. Her tiny hand clutched the hem of her mother's nightgown. "Tomorrow, you won't have to be afraid in this house anymore. Tomorrow, Daddy will take you to a place where you can be yourself, where you'll be loved and valued." On our last night in the old house, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the noise of Kevin's party. I sat by the window, looking out at the garden, where the plants cultivated by my father's hands were now littered with cigarette butts and splashed with the remnants of his friends' drinks. My heart ached, not for the things, but for the memory of the work of a man who was already gone. Sarah came and placed a hand on my shoulder. In the faint light of the lamp, I saw her red-rimmed eyes. Sarah was the most patient woman I knew. In 10 years of marriage, she had never confronted my mother. No matter how cruel her mother-in-law was, she had dedicated her youth to caring for that house and for me, so I could work in peace. "Are we really leaving, Jack?" Sarah asked, her voice as faint as a whisper of wind. I turned and held her thin hand. "Yes, we are. Are you sad to leave this place?" Sarah shook her head, and tears rolled down her face. "I'm not sad for the house or the wealth. It hurts me for you. You worked so hard all these years. You spent sleepless nights. How many times did you stay up all night in the cold workshop in winter to finish an order on time? And in the end, they treat you like a stranger." I pulled Sarah closer, letting her rest her head on my chest. I felt her deep, prolonged pain. Sarah, I don't see this as a loss. I see it as the price to pay for your peace and Lily's. If we had stayed, if I had kept pushing for the company, sooner or later, we would have broken. You can see that my mother only wants a grandson and heir, and Kevin only wants the director's chair. They don't need us. They just need what we produce. Sarah sobbed. I remember that time. The time I lost our second baby. I had just come back from the hospital, and your mother didn't even ask how I was feeling. She just blamed me for not being able to hold on to the pregnancy to continue the family line. You were abroad at the time, handling a wood import. I didn't have the heart to tell you. I was afraid of worrying you. I lay alone in this room, listening to Kevin and Jessica's laughter from the other side of the door, and my heart was breaking into pieces. I was stunned. It was the first time Sarah had told me that story. I only knew she'd had a miscarriage due to exhaustion. I thought my mother had mourned with us. It turned out, behind my back, Sarah had endured such cruel emotional blows. Forgive me. Forgive me for not protecting you better. I held her tighter. My heart ached. It's my fault for being so absorbed in work. I thought if I made a lot of money, my mother would be satisfied and would love you. I was wrong. Sarah wiped her tears and looked at me, her eyes tearful but strong. No, it's not your fault. You're the best man in the world. It's precisely because you're so good that people dare to treat you this way. Now, I'm not crying from sadness. I'm crying from joy. Joy because from today on, we're going to live for ourselves. We talked all night. I told Sarah about Grandfather Arthur's will. He had been a renowned master woodworker. He was the one who had passed on to me all the secrets of selecting and treating wood, things you can't learn anywhere. My grandfather knew my mother's nature. She's smart, but obsessed with status and the family inheritance, he used to say. The family business might one day fall into the hands of someone who doesn't value it. That's why he secretly left me a legacy no one could take away. The patents for a technology to treat fine woods without chemicals, and a separate account in my name in a foreign bank. Sarah looked at me with wide-eyed surprise. Grandpa was so farsighted. Yes, he loved me for my hard work and loyalty to the family. He said, Jack, one day a storm will brew in this house. When you feel you no longer have a place here, leave. Don't cling to an empty shell. Preserve the soul of the craft. The next morning, we woke up when the sun was already high. Kevin was still sleeping off the previous night's party. I went down to the kitchen and saw my mother sitting alone, having a frugal breakfast. She looked tired, her face drawn. Mom, I called out softly. She raised her head, her gaze seeming slightly lost. You're awake? Have you handed over the business to your brother? Here are the keys to the warehouse, the truck, and all the accounting. I've left detailed notes on pending and urgent matters. As of today, I am no longer an employee of Miller Legacy Furniture. Sarah, Lily, and I are leaving. My mother took the bundle of keys, her hand trembling slightly. Where? Where are you going? Up north, to the mountains. We're going far away for a change of scenery for Lily. Mom, take care of your health. Kevin will be taking care of you now. I'm leaving with a clear conscience. I gave my mother a final bow and turned to leave. I didn't have the courage to look back, afraid of seeing belated tears or, even worse, icy indifference. The taxi was already waiting at the gate. Sarah and Lily were inside. I cast one last look at the house, at the Miller Legacy Furniture sign that was already starting to fade. I knew that the real storm for that family was just beginning, and I had managed to move the people dearest to me to a safe harbor before it broke. The car pulled away, leaving behind intrigues, calculations, and pain. The Blue Ridge Mountains, a land of forests and crystal-clear waters, awaited us for a new beginning. The interstate bus cut through the night, carrying my small family far from the bustling, interest-filled city. Lily slept soundly in Sarah's lap, her tiny hand still clutching my finger as if afraid I would disappear again on one of my long business trips. Looking at my wife, I saw her eyes were still red from crying. I gently put my arm around her shoulders, offering support. Jack, Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse. When you told me about your grandfather, it still felt like a dream. He passed away 5 years ago. Why did you only tell me now? I see Hill. The image of my kind grandfather, with his white beard and warm smile, appeared before my eyes. I didn't want to hide it from you, but Grandpa asked me to. As long as there's peace in the family, he said, be a respectful son and a responsible brother. But when people's hearts change, and you have no other choice, then open that box. He understood my mother better than anyone. On his deathbed, my grandfather called me to speak with him alone. In the official will, he left nothing to my mother or Kevin, which made her furious for a long time. But to me, he handed a small, masterfully carved wooden box. Inside was a yellowed notebook and a card from an international bank. Grandpa wasn't just a craftsman, he was a self-taught researcher, I explained to Sarah. In that notebook is the entire technology for extracting natural oils, for treating wood against pests, and for coloring it without harsh chemicals. You know that in demanding markets like Germany or Scandinavia, there are very strict requirements for sustainability and ecology. Grandpa's technology is what the entire industry covets. Sarah stared at me, her eyes wide. So, all those big contracts you secured, that's how? I nodded. I secretly applied his technology for the luxury orders, but I took it on as my personal technical responsibility. My mother and Kevin thought it was the weight of the old Miller Legacy furniture brand, but they didn't know that the clients only trusted the quality of the wood personally treated by me. I remember my grandfather telling me in the late afternoons, Jack, the root of woodworking is not in the valuable wood, but in the soul of the master. The best wood in the hands of a greedy man will turn to dust. And a simple plank, in the hands of a master with a soul, becomes a work of art. Your mother is too attached to appearances, and Kevin is too shallow. You are the only one who can save the soul of our family. The bank card he gave me, I didn't intend to touch it at first. I wanted to support the family and the company with my own work, but over the last 5 years, whenever I made a good profit, my mother found a way to transfer money to Kevin for his absurd real estate projects or to buy luxury cars and designer clothes. The savings my mother handed me were actually just a small fraction of what I had earned. Grandpa left enough for us to start from scratch, anywhere. I whispered to my wife. That money, along with the patents I secretly registered in our name, is our protective shield, something Kevin and my mother will never know about. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief and rested her head on my shoulder. I don't need millions. I just need you and our daughter to be safe. But hearing you say that makes me feel lighter. It turns out, Grandpa was watching over and protecting you all along. I looked out the bus window. The roadside lights faded into the distance. I thanked my grandfather for teaching me patience. In 15 years, I had fully repaid my mother for raising me and fulfilled my duty as an older brother. Now, my grandfather's secret would be my starting point to build a true kingdom for my wife and daughter. A kingdom without prejudice, without criticism, just the scent of wood and love. Meanwhile, back in our hometown, the first days of the new director's reign, Kevin, were beginning at Miller Legacy Furniture. Early in the morning, in the office still reeking of alcohol and smoke from the night's party, Kevin stretched in my large leather chair, his feet propped on the desk, an expensive cigar in his mouth. Yes, Mr. Davis? Yes, this is Kevin. From today, I'm leading Miller Legacy Furniture instead of Jack. Yeah, he went up to the mountains to rest. Regarding the contract for the oak supply for you, I'll instruct the craftsman to start immediately. There was silence on the other end of the line, and then the voice of Mr. Davis, a major player in the lumber market, sounded hesitant. Kevin, I've worked with your company for 10 years because of Jack's reputation. Until now, I've only accepted orders with his personal signature guaranteeing quality control. Now that he's gone, it's going to be very difficult for us to continue. Kevin paled but tried to maintain a friendly tone. Oh, come on, Mr. Davis. Jack was just an employee of my mother's. The company is ours. I'll give you a 5% discount. Don't worry. I don't need your 5%, he cut in. In our business, a millimeter's error costs millions of dollars. Improperly dried wood, incorrect treatment, and the losses will be colossal. I'm going to temporarily suspend the contract to reconsider. Goodbye. The The sound of the call ending made a furious Kevin slam the phone on the desk. He didn't understand that in this business, you didn't buy wood from a company. You bought the eye of the master who chose it. Tycoons like Mr. Davis or the partners from Germany knew very well who Jack Miller was. They knew only Jack would spend weeks wandering through forests looking for a unique tree, and only Jack knew how to make the wood breathe so it wouldn't crack. At the same time, in our old house, my mother was busy receiving a delegation from Germany. They were the strategic partners I had been trying to win over for 3 years. They had come to sign a long-term contract to supply exclusive furniture to a chain of 5-star hotels in Berlin. My mother graciously offered them tea. "Please, gentlemen, this is my younger son, the new director of the company. From today, you can discuss all matters with him." The head of the delegation, Herr Weber, sized up Kevin with a cold gaze from head to toe. He said nothing, just took the preliminary contract from his briefcase and pointed to the fine print at the bottom. "The contract is valid only under the condition of direct technical supervision by engineer Jack Miller." Kevin was at a loss, sweat beading on his forehead. "Herr Weber, Jack is my older brother. He's temporarily away. I can replace him." Herr Weber stood up, gave a slight bow out of politeness, but his words were firm. "Mrs. Miller, young man, we drafted this contract with Miller Legacy Furniture because we trusted the mastery and integrity of Mr. Miller. Without him, your company is just another ordinary workshop. We are forced to cancel our collaboration intentions until we can meet with Mr. Miller again." The delegation left, leaving my mother petrified in the middle of the room and Kevin as white as a sheet. The truth they would never know was that all the major contracts of Miller Legacy Furniture were, in reality, personal agreements made with me. I had anticipated this. In working with partners, I was always honest. As long as I was there, the wood would meet the standards. If I left, Miller Legacy Furniture would cease to be what it was. They trusted me so much that they were willing to include that clause in the legal document. My mother began to tremble. She looked at Kevin, the son she was so proud of for giving her an heir. Now he was nervously shuffling papers he didn't understand. Debts to banks, orders awaiting processing, relationships crumbling. All of it was starting to advance like a tsunami towards her majestic home. Margaret Miller sank into a chair. Her trembling hands clutched a cup of now cold tea. She suddenly remembered me, sweating buckets, running back and forth in the workshop in 100-degree summer heat, or when I was taken to the hospital after another exhausting round of negotiations that had yielded $1 million contract. At the time, she considered it the duty of the eldest son. Now that I was gone, she understood the magnitude of that weight. "Kevin, call your brother immediately," my mother ordered, her voice trembling. "Mom, I've already called. His phone is off." "He's definitely trying to run from his responsibilities," Kevin shouted, trying to hide his own fear. He didn't know I wasn't running from any responsibility. I was just taking what was mine. Those contracts, that reputation, that name Jack Miller, master of wood, had never truly belonged to the company Miller Legacy Furniture. They were the intangible capital I had built with blood and sweat over 15 years. After nearly 10 hours on the bus, the air began to change. The heat of the plains gave way to a cool breeze scented with pine resin. The Blue Ridge Mountains revealed themselves to us in a morning mist, a town on the slopes with old stone and wood houses and the tranquility I had dreamed of so much. We got off at a small stop. Lily rubbed her eyes and shouted with excitement, "Daddy, look at all the clouds. Is our house going to be in the clouds?" I smiled and picked her up. "Yes, sweetheart. Our house will be where the clouds come in through the window." Sarah looked around. Despite her exhaustion, her eyes shone with hope. "Where to?" "Away from the center. We'll live on the outskirts. A small plot of land with a garden that I asked Mark to buy for us 2 years ago. It's quiet. There's enough land for you to plant flowers. And I can build a small workshop for myself." We took a taxi towards a small village at the foot of the mountain. The road wound through hills of pine trees and gardens of vibrant hydrangeas. Our land was situated on a hillside overlooking a deep valley. A small, sturdy stone and wood house already stood there. Upon entering, I smelled fresh pine and wild herbs, and my soul felt lighter. I put down the bags, opened the window, and looked out at the valley. I was flooded with a sense of total freedom. No more of my mother's yelling, Kevin's scorn, or the drunken stupors in our family home. "It's beautiful, Jack," Sarah whispered beside me. "I never imagined we could have a place like this. This is from my personal savings, from bonuses clients gave me." "It's not company money," I explained. "I wanted to bring the whole family here for vacations, but it seems this place is just for us now." I started cleaning the house. Lily ran around the yard, chasing butterflies. Sarah quickly lit the fireplace, and the smell of smoke mixed with the aroma of coffee. The new life had truly begun. In the first few days in the mountains, I wasn't in a hurry to get back to work. I spent time with my wife buying rose and lavender seeds for our garden. I walked with my daughter among the pine trees, teaching her to listen to the birdsong and distinguish the leaves of the trees. But deep down, I knew I couldn't stay idle for long. The craft was in my blood. At night, when my wife and daughter were asleep, I sat on the porch, studying my grandfather's notebook. Formulas for wood treatment, secrets of fine carving. I wanted to apply them to pieces under my own brand, the Jack Miller Workshop. Still awake? Sarah came out and put a wool sweater over my shoulders. "Making plans. I want to open a flower nursery and combine it with a wood art workshop. Tourists will come not just to admire the flowers, but also to see how we transform rough pieces of wood into works with a soul." Sarah looked at me with complete confidence. "I believe you'll succeed. After all, you're Jack Miller, the master. Where you are, miracles made by human hands happen." I held her hand, looking at the faint lights of the village far below. I knew that down there, Kevin and my mother must be desperately trying to save the company, but I also knew that for greed and injustice, sooner or later, a price must be paid. I didn't hate them, I just pitied them for having lost the most valuable thing in the family: blood ties and honesty. Tomorrow, I would start building my workshop. Tomorrow, the flowers in the garden would take root. And tomorrow, a new, bright, and calm chapter in my family's life would begin, on that windswept plateau. The morning sun in the mountains was as soft as honey, but I knew that back home, the atmosphere must be white-hot. After settling my wife and daughter, I decided to catch the first bus back to my hometown, not out of nostalgia, but to perform the final ritual, to hand my mother my resignation letter. Upon entering the grounds of Miller Legacy Furniture, I felt like a stranger. The piles of wood in the yard looked rough and lifeless. The sound of saws still echoed, but it was intermittent, lacking the energetic rhythm of my time. I went straight to my mother's office. Margaret was sitting at her desk, her face etched with the fatigue of several days of failed negotiations. Seeing me, her eyes lit up with hope for a second, but it was quickly hidden behind her usual severity. "You're back. Where have you been these last few days? Why is your phone off? Kevin is about to lose his mind over that German contract. Go help him, quickly." Her voice was still filled with a tone of authority. I silently placed a white envelope on the desk. "Mom, I came back to give you this." My mother narrowed her eyes and opened the envelope with trembling hands. Upon seeing the words "letter of resignation," her face went from red to a deathly pale. She slammed her hand on the desk, spilling her tea. What kind of joke is this? You're abandoning the company at such a critical time? You are the eldest son, the pillar of this family. How can you be so vile?" I stood calmly, looking her directly in the eye. "Mom, you announced in front of the whole family that you were passing leadership of the company to Kevin. I am now a stranger in this company. Kevin needs space to prove his worth, and I need time to care for my small family." "Small family? You only think about your wife and daughter and not your old mother. Have you forgotten the legacy of our ancestors?" my mother shouted, her voice breaking with anger. "I gave you a portion of my savings. What more do you want? Are you trying to blackmail me with this resignation to force me to undo my decision to give power to Kevin?" I gave a bitter smile. It seemed that in my mother's eyes, all my actions were calculated. "You've misunderstood me, Mom. I don't need more money, and I'm not fighting for the director's position. I gave 15 years of my youth to transform Miller Legacy Furniture from a small workshop into a large company. I consider my debt to this family fully paid. From this moment on, let me live my own life." At that moment, Kevin stormed out of the adjoining room, his face furious. "Brother, have you completely lost your mind? You know damn well the clients only listen to you, and that's why they're making my life difficult. And you choose this moment to quit? You want to ruin me? Ruin the whole family just to feel better?" I looked at my younger brother, whom I had once cared for so much. "Kevin, if you're as good as you say you are, you'll find new clients on your own. The reputation of Miller Legacy Furniture was built by the work of several generations, not just mine. Trust yourself and work." "You ungrateful son," my mother screamed, pointing a finger at me. "You think you're the king of the world just because of your talent. Get out! Get out and never set foot in this house again. I'll pretend I don't have a son." My mother's words were the final blow that severed the thin thread of family feeling. I gave her one last bow and turned my back in silence to leave. On my way to the door, I saw the old master craftsmen looking at me with sadness. I nodded to them in farewell, feeling the heavy armor fall from my shoulders. As I walked out the gate, I didn't look back. I knew that behind me lay the ruins of old values and greed, and ahead of me, the road opened up to my wife and daughter, to the scents of the mountains. My mother could call me ungrateful, but heaven sees all. You reap what you sow. After my departure, Kevin, like a bird, freed from its cage, held back no longer. He no longer had to fear my stern gaze or listen to advice about technology he considered outdated. To him, business was about contacts, money, and putting on a show. He immediately ordered the director's office to be redone. My modest oak desk was thrown into storage, and in its place, they put a gleaming imported desk with gold accents. He bought an expensive sound system and displayed bottles of luxury spirits to impress guests. "See? A director's office has to look like this to command respect," Jessica said, touching up her lipstick. "That brother of yours, Jack, was such a cheapskate. A director who looked like a carpenter, always smelling of sawdust. Now you're the boss. You have to live like a lord." Kevin smiled victoriously, twisting a new diamond ring on his finger. "You're right. My mother was very smart to give me the power. I'll prove to this town that without Jack, Miller Legacy Furniture will be even richer. I'm going to invest in real estate, in stocks. I'm not going to waste time with these rotten logs." His arrogance reached its peak when he threw a party for his drinking buddies, right in the office. Already tipsy, he beat his chest. "Boys, don't worry. In my hands, Miller Legacy Furniture will be the queen company of the region. My brother was just a workaholic, but he can't hold a candle to my intelligence. My mom just freed up $50,000 in working capital for me." Now the fun begins. His mother, standing behind the door, saw her younger son being praised by his friends and swelled with pride. She still believed her choice had been the right one. She thought Kevin had leadership qualities, the audacity of youth, while I was too conservative. She didn't realize that the $50,000 was her entire life savings for her old age, which Kevin was now squandering on senseless entertainment. Kevin began to change the staff. The old master craftsmen who had worked there since my father's time were fired on the pretext that they acted smart and demanded high salaries. In their place, he hired his friends, who only knew how to flatter and knew nothing about wood. "Mr. Miller, the new shipment of pine has arrived. We need to check the quality," a young worker asked. Kevin waved his hand without taking his eyes off his phone screen, where he was watching stock quotes. "Just unload it into the warehouse. Wood is wood. We'll paint it, and it'll look nice. Don't bother me with trifles." It was precisely this arrogance and blatant incompetence that sowed the first seeds of ruin. Kevin believed that with his mother's capital, he could solve any difficulty. He thought he was smarter than everyone, but in reality, he was just a child with a sharp sword in his hands that he didn't know how to wield, and sooner or later, he would hurt himself and those around him. At night, Kevin and Jessica made plans for the luxurious life they would lead, about buying a villa in Palm Beach and sending Tommy to study abroad. They were living in the illusory light of the status I had built with so much sacrifice for the Miller Legacy Furniture brand, not knowing that this glow was dimming with every step I took away from the company. The storm didn't break all at once. It started with the cold winds from the clients. Just a week after Kevin took full control, the first problems arose. On Monday morning, A delegation from the neighboring county arrived at the office. They didn't bring smiles. They brought anger. They were led by Mr. Henderson, a longtime client who had great respect for me. "Young man, how do you explain this batch of mahogany?" Mr. Henderson slammed his hand on Kevin's shiny desk. "The contract clearly specifies first-choice wood, treated according to Jack Miller's biological technology. I just installed it on the job site, and after 3 days, the wood started to crack. The color isn't uniform. I had an expert evaluate it, and they told me this is pressed particle board treated with low-quality chemicals. An outright fraud." Kevin was flustered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Mr. Henderson, there must have been some mistake during transport. We'll investigate." "What mistake?" "I've worked with Jack for 10 years, and there was never a defective material." "As soon as he leaves, you decide to commit fraud?" "Mr. Henderson shouted, his voice audible even in the workshop. "I demand the cancellation of the contract and the return of my deposit. Otherwise, I'll take you to court and tell the entire business association about this." In a panic, Kevin started calling his subordinates, but they just exchanged confused glances. The experienced craftsman who knew how to work the wood had been fired just days before. Simultaneously, other major partners also began to act strangely. The phone calls Kevin had been so proud of now became a nightmare. Some canceled contracts with the excuse of a change in plans. Others demanded a personal meeting with engineer Miller to confirm the quality before paying. The culmination of all this was the visit from a major bank representative. On Wednesday, he didn't come to congratulate the new director, but to notify them of the early execution of a loan due to the drastic changes in personnel and the company's falling reputation. My mother, upon hearing this, rushed to the office. Seeing the chaos of arguing clients and flustered employees, she nearly fainted. "Kevin, what's happening? Why do all the clients want their money back?" Margaret grabbed her son's arm. Kevin had lost all his self-confidence. He yelled like a child caught misbehaving. "It's Jack's fault. He must have convinced the clients to turn against me. He wants to see me ruined." My mother looked at Kevin, then at the luxurious but empty director's office. For the first time, she was afraid. She realized that the shiny facade of Miller Legacy Furniture, which she was so proud of, was rotten from the inside. The clients didn't want a desk with gold trim or expensive drinks. They wanted the soul and skillful hands of a true master. "Take the money I gave you and fix this immediately. Give Mr. Henderson his money back and sort things out with the bank to postpone the payment," Margaret whispered. She didn't know that the $50,000 had already been invested by Kevin in a shady land deal on the advice of his drinking buddies. In the safe, there were only a few $100s left, not even enough to pay the workers' salaries for that month. The storm was just beginning. Kevin and his mother were still trying to plug the holes, not realizing that the foundation of Miller Legacy Furniture Trust had been completely destroyed and had traveled with me to the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I, from afar, remained silent. Not out of revenge, but because I knew that this was the price they had to pay to learn to value a person and honesty in business. While I enjoyed the quiet mornings in the mountains, breathing in the scent of pine and watching Sarah water the new roses, back in my hometown, the storm of debt was crashing down on the roof of Miller Legacy Furniture. News from the city reached me through brief calls from former master woodworkers. They told me the atmosphere at the company had become suffocating. The $50,000 my mother had given Kevin had evaporated in dubious real estate projects. In truth, Kevin had been swindled by his own friends. There was no working capital left. Revenue from old contracts ceased because clients refused to accept defective goods. Miller Legacy Furniture was sinking in debt. One evening, Master Fernando, an old craftsman who had worked with my father, called me. His voice trembled. "Jack, the company is on the brink of bankruptcy. Today, creditors came to the gate and threatened to seal the warehouse if the bank interest isn't paid next week. Kevin has locked himself in his office, and Mrs. Miller keeps fainting. We workers haven't been paid in 3 months. Everyone wants to quit." I listened in silence, and my heart ached. Despite my decision to leave, it pained me to know that the company my father and I had built was collapsing. But I knew that if I intervened at that moment, I would be putting the yoke of injustice back on my own neck. At that same time, in the office, Kevin sat with his head in his hands. In front of him was a pile of overdue payment notices from 3 different banks. The figures for interest on interest danced before his eyes. "Mom, what do I do?" he cried to Margaret when she regained consciousness after another fainting spell. "I didn't expect that project to take so long. Now we have no liquidity, and the clients are demanding to return the wood that's in the warehouse. I think I'm going to run." Margaret, her face gray and lips trembling, replied, "If you run, what will I do with this house? The entire legacy of our ancestors, the honor of our family, is it all going to be lost because of you, Kevin?" She looked at her younger son, whom she had adored so much. Now he looked miserable and cowardly. She suddenly remembered me. In the past, when the company faced difficulties, I had silently sold my own motorcycle and spent sleepless nights in the workshop to save an order, never letting my mother worry. Kevin, however, at the first sign of trouble, was ready to flee. "Kevin, calm down. I still have some land in the countryside. I'll see if I can sell it," Margaret whispered, trying to cling to the last shred of hope for her favorite son. But she didn't know that the real estate market in that area was stagnant, and no one would pay attention to her listings. Meanwhile, raw material suppliers stopped their deliveries. The Miller Legacy furniture trucks, which used to be constantly on the move, were now parked outside, their tires beginning to deflate. The final straw was the arrival of the notice of electricity disconnection for non-payment. The sound of saws and machines, the soul of the workshop, fell completely silent. That silence was more terrifying than any argument. It heralded the inevitable end. Kevin wasn't even thinking about being rich anymore. He was afraid of the courts and going to prison. The title of director, which he had been so proud of, had now become a heavy yoke. Every night, I sat on the porch of my house in the mountains, looking at the horizon with a heavy heart. Sarah would approach and place a cup of hot ginger tea in my hands. She didn't ask questions, but I knew she understood everything. "Don't blame yourself," she said in a low voice. "To grow, a tree must grip the earth with its own roots. If it's always watered with the sweat of others, the day those people leave, the tree dries up. It's the price of growth that Kevin has to pay." I sighed and drank the bitter tea. The debt storm back home would surely take even more. And I knew that when cornered, people often commit acts they would never have the courage to do under normal circumstances. When the money flowed, Jessica, Kevin's wife, was a golden daughter-in-law to Margaret, always sweet-tongued and charming. And because she had produced the male heir Tommy, she enjoyed her mother-in-law's unconditional favor. But as they say, you find out who your friends are in times of trouble. When Miller Legacy Furniture began to sink in debt, Jessica's true nature manifested with frightening rawness and coldness. In the last few days, her fawning laughter was no longer heard in the old house. Instead, from Kevin and Jessica's room came shouts and the sound of breaking dishes. "I told you not to listen to those friends of yours," Jessica shrieked, her voice shrill. "And now my money, my gold, you've melted it all away in that ghost project of yours. I won't let my son suffer because of your stupidity." Margaret, standing behind the door, heard these words and felt a pang of pain in her heart. She knocked gently on the door to intervene, but Jessica flung it open with a furious face. In her eyes, there was not the slightest trace of her former amiability. She looked coldly at her mother-in-law. "Look at your son, Mom. What kind of director is he if the creditors are coming to kick us out of the house? Just so you know, that gold you gave me at the wedding, I hid it away a long time ago, and don't think I'm going to give it up to pay the company's debts." Margaret was speechless. "Jessica, how can you say that? When things were going well, you enjoyed the benefits, and now that there are problems in the family, you should support your husband. Tommy is part of this family too." Jessica smiled sarcastically. "Part of this family? When Jack was here making money, you called him a cash cow. Now that Kevin has ruined everything, you want us to pay? I'm not stupid, Mom. I only care about Tommy. If we lose this house, I'm taking my son and going straight to my parents' house." Margaret staggered and grabbed the banister to keep from falling. She couldn't believe that the daughter-in-law she was so proud of, whom she had held up as an example, had turned out to be so ungrateful. She remembered Sarah, her quiet, older daughter-in-law. In the past, when the company was short on cash, Sarah would silently take off her own wedding earrings and give them to her. Sarah had cared for her when she was sick, despite all the criticism and humiliation. The nightmare didn't end there. Jessica began to brazenly take everything of value from the house. She secretly took expensive decorative items, porcelain and antique silver, to her mother's house. One day, seeing that Margaret was unwell and bedridden, Jessica even rummaged through her mother-in-law's dresser, looking for a bank book or any hidden gold. "What are you doing in my room?" Margaret whispered, catching Jessica going through her drawer. "Just needed some more money for groceries, Mom." "Kevin hasn't given me a cent," Jessica replied shamelessly. She grabbed some bills from the table and left without a second glance. Jessica's betrayal was like a bucket of cold water for Margaret and her beliefs in male superiority and heirs. She understood that her precious grandson and heir had only served as a pretext for others to take advantage of her trust. When the money ran out, the family ties she had so zealously built based on her preference burst like a soap bubble. That night, Margaret sat alone in her prayer room, looking at her husband's portrait. She cried the belated tears of a mother who had made a terrible mistake. She suddenly realized she had driven away those who truly loved her and brought a calculating, false woman into her home. However, her pride still wouldn't allow her to call me. Instead, instigated by Kevin, a dark plan began to form in her mind. Desperation opened Kevin's eyes. He understood that only Jack could negotiate with the banks. Only Jack could win back the German clients. But he also knew that after everything they had done, I would never return for a simple call. "Mom, I have an idea," Kevin said in a conspiratorial whisper. "Jack is a dutiful son, and he loves his daughter more than his own life. If you pretend to be seriously ill, and we find a way to lure Lily here, he'll definitely bring money to save us." Margaret hesitated at first. "Won't that be too cruel, my son? Lily is still so young." "What's cruel, Mom? We're family. He's getting rich up in the mountains while we're starving here. That's what's cruel. I'm just borrowing Lily for a few days. As soon as Jack comes back and signs some papers to co-sign the debt, I'll let her go," Kevin convinced her. In his eyes shone the desperation of a man backed into a corner. And so, the show began. That morning, they called Sarah from the house. On the other end of the line was Kevin's tragic crying. Sister-in-law Sarah. Mom had a stroke. She keeps calling for Jack and Lily. The doctor says it's unlikely she'll survive. Bring Lily, so she can see her grandmother one last time." Hearing this, Sarah was distraught. As much as Margaret had mistreated her, as a daughter-in-law, she couldn't turn her back knowing her mother-in-law was on her deathbed. While I was out delivering an order to a tourist, Sarah hastily grabbed Lily and caught the bus. She only had time to send me a brief text. "Jack, your mom is gravely ill, dying. Taking Lily to the house urgently. Finish your things and come." When I read the message, my heart clenched. A bad feeling came over me. I knew my mother's health. It was frail, yes, but not enough for something so sudden. I tried calling Sarah, but her phone was unreachable, perhaps due to poor reception in the mountains or a dead battery. Meanwhile, as soon as Sarah and Lily got off the bus in our hometown, Kevin was waiting for them with a pained expression. He quickly put them in an old car and drove home. However, as soon as they entered the house, Sarah froze. Margaret wasn't in an ICU bed, but sitting up in her own. Her face was pale from fasting to simulate illness, but her eyes held a cold calculation. "Mom, how are you feeling?" Sarah rushed over. Margaret didn't answer directly. She grabbed Lily's hand and said, "Lily's here. You're going to stay with Grandma for a few days, okay?" At that moment, Kevin stepped out and locked the living room door. His true face was revealed. "Sister-in-law Sarah, don't judge us. The company is in tens of millions of debt. If Jack doesn't come back, sign a guarantee agreement, and hand over Grandpa's secret technologies, neither you nor your daughter will leave this house." Sarah was horrified and clutched Lily to her. "Kevin, what are you saying? How could you use your mother's illness to hold a child hostage? If Jack finds out, you're done for." "We'll see what he does," Kevin sneered. "Jessica, take Lily upstairs and don't let her out of your sight. Sister-in-law Sarah, call Jack immediately. Tell him to bring all the technical documents and money in exchange for his daughter. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what the creditors at the gate might do to her." Lily started screaming in fear. "Mommy, I'm scared. I want Daddy." Jessica lunged and tore Lily from Sarah's arms. She dragged the crying girl upstairs, ignoring her mother's protests. Margaret sat and watched it all, saw her granddaughter crying desperately, but she remained silent and turned her face away. The need for money had extinguished the last spark of humanity in her. Sarah collapsed to the floor, weeping. She realized she had fallen into a terrible trap set by her closest relatives. The house she once considered her own had now become a prison. But they made one mistake. They didn't know that the Jack of today was not the submissive, suffering son of the past. When your own family becomes a source of suffering for your children, you become a lion to protect your most precious treasure. And at that moment, on my way back, in my briefcase, I had not only money, but also irrefutable proof of Kevin's fraud that had accumulated over the years. In this fight, I would not take a single step back. The night bus tore through the darkness, the engine's roar mirroring the storm raging in my soul. Outside, the dark silhouettes of the Blue Ridge pines sped by, giving way to the sparse lights of small towns. In my inner jacket pocket, my phone remained silent. No news from Sarah. I remembered Lily's big, round eyes when she asked me, "Daddy, why does Grandma like Tommy more than me?" At the time, I had just stroked her hair, replying that Grandma was just tired or busy. I had covered my mother's injustice with my own magnanimity, hoping my sincerity would one day melt her heart. But now I saw I had been wrong. My blind obedience had turned into complicity, and today, my closest relatives were using my wife and daughter to satisfy their greed. Jack, why were you so honorable if you couldn't protect your family?" I mentally berated myself, my fists clenched until my knuckles turned white. Throughout the journey, I reread the documents my grandfather had left. Besides the trade secrets, there was a small notebook with a record of Kevin's questionable expenses, which my grandfather had secretly compiled. Grandpa had good intuition. He had noticed Kevin's greedy character traits in his youth, even as my mother spoiled him excessively. And now, thanks to the veteran craftsman, I also had more recent proof of the times Kevin had siphoned money from the company to pay off gambling debts, even while I continued to bear the entire burden. My grandfather was an upright man who had always lived with a clear conscience. I knew that if he were alive, he couldn't have borne such a betrayal. I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself. I'm not making this journey for revenge, but to restore justice and peace of mind to my family. God, protect Sarah and Lily, I prayed, seeing the highway signs and the headlights approaching my city. This was not the journey of a virtuous son. It was the journey of a man returning to save what was his. I would never make concessions again, nor would I applaud submissively. The Jack Miller forged over 15 hard years of work had now truly awakened. At 4 a.m., I stood before the gates of the old house. The imposing wrought iron gates, which I was once proud of, now looked cold and oppressive. It was so quiet I could hear the chirping of crickets. I didn't ring the bell. I used the old key I had never gotten rid of to enter discreetly. The living room reeked of stale tobacco and cheap alcohol. The light was still on. Kevin was asleep, his head on his new director's desk, surrounded by empty bottles. Hearing my footsteps, he woke with a start. His eyes were red from sleepless nights and a hangover. "Who's there?" he demanded. After the initial shock, his face transformed into a look of perverse glee. Well, big brother, you came back so quickly. I had a feeling. Only Lily could bring you back to this hole." I didn't look at him. My eyes were fixed on the second floor, where I could hear Lily's faint crying. "Where are Sarah and my daughter? Let them go now." My voice was low, but held a profound severity that made Kevin step back. "Don't scare me." Kevin staggered to his feet. "Look around. You see the creditors surrounding the house. You definitely have the money and the formula for Grandpa's patents and secrets. You're going to hand it all over now if you want to save me and Mom. Otherwise, your wife and daughter will never leave this house." At that exact moment, my mother came out of her bedroom. She looked so aged and worn out. Her face was ashen from her feigned illness, but now it also showed great fear. She didn't dare look at me, only managing to murmur, We had no choice. Kevin was in so much debt. They were threatening to kill us. I set my gaze on my mother, feeling a painful tightness in my heart. Mom, you went so far as to stage a fake kidnapping with Kevin to cover for him, against your own daughter-in-law and granddaughter. Have you forgotten what family ties mean? Lily is only 6 years old. What fault does she have in this? My mother fell silent as tears streamed down her face, filling the deep wrinkles of an old woman. However, Kevin was not quieted. Let's cut the crap. Did you bring the money? Sign the bank guarantee right now. At that moment, I didn't hesitate. I punched Kevin in the face, a blow he should have received 10 years ago to straighten him out. The impact sent him sprawling onto the mess of bottles, spilling the last drops on the carpet as a trickle of blood flowed from his open mouth. Listen to me carefully, Kevin. I would never have come back, just to write a blank check for your messes. I came to take back what's mine. To get Sarah and Lily and leave you with the credit for your sins. Suddenly, the disheveled, frantic figure of Jessica appeared, brandishing an ornate porcelain vase as she rushed down the stairs, blind with fury, aiming for my head. You ungrateful bastard! You think you can just come here and kill your own brother? Don't even try to get closer, or I swear I'll throw Lily down the entire flight of stairs. I stood motionless, staring her down. Jessica, don't assume I haven't noticed you and your mother sneaking belongings out of this house for days, all part of this theater you and Kevin staged. You created drama to squeeze money from me while you're pilfering what's left. Jessica froze, her bravado evaporating in the face of my cold resolve. The fear was palpable in those who were used to me playing the part of the long-suffering victim. I was ready to unleash a primal instinct to protect my own. Jack, what are you talking about? What hidden money? My mother's choked voice asked, not fully trusting what she was hearing. I threw a thick file of papers on the table. Here's the proof. Transfers from your accounts, Mom. The credit card statements. Funds he siphoned over $200,000 into a clandestine account co-owned with his mother-in-law. You're making shit up, you bastard, Kevin yelled, lunging for the papers. I blocked him, holding my ground. Mom, look at the documentation. All that talk about bad investments and bankruptcy was a lie. It was a cover for his gambling debts. My mother fumbled with the papers, her eyes frantically scanning for familiar signatures. The scrawl was unmistakably her precious son's. In a flash of understanding, the verdict crashed down on her, a devastating blow to her already broken heart. What does this mean, Kevin? She cried, her voice a shattered, wailing sound of a woman betrayed. Kevin's arrogant facade crumbled. He collapsed into pleading sobs. They cheated me. It was supposed to be a profitable deal for Tommy's future. Mom, don't believe Jack's lies. Jessica, seeing her chance in the emotional chaos, tried to sneak upstairs. I blocked her path. Where do you think you're going? And where's the key to the room where you locked them up? Give it to me. This grotesque scene, unfolding in the first light of dawn, was a testament to the accumulated deceptions of Miller Legacy Furniture. The ruin came not from German partners, but from the rot within, a rot nourished by my own mother's blind adoration for her spoiled younger son. He lay on the floor amid his empty bottles, a filthy testament to the abyss he had created and dragged everyone into. I approached my desolated mother, my words relentless. Now you see the truth, Mom. You see what you sacrificed everything for. You pushed away those who were loyal to you, only to be betrayed by the one you cherished. The poison you nurtured has finally consumed this house. The locket around her neck slipped and shattered on the stone floor. She buried her head in her hands, her body racked with inconsolable sobs, unable to bear the weight of her colossal maternal error. There was no pity in me for their games. I ran upstairs, shoved Jessica aside, and broke down the door. I rescued Sarah from her ordeal and freed Lily, who jumped into my arms, sobbing with relief. Daddy, I knew you'd come. I prayed and prayed. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollowed out by fear and sleepless nights. In that moment, I held my entire world, and with my daughter in my arms, I walked back down the stairs without a backward glance. I saw my mother, still frozen in stone-like grief, and Kevin, crawling on the floor. Mom, I said as I passed, I'll let the lawyers handle the legal disputes. He has to answer for his crimes. Take care of your health. I walked out the door, leaving the wreckage behind. As I reached the gates with Sarah and Lily, a large, sober black car pulled up abruptly. Out stepped Mr. Thompson, the veteran lawyer, my late grandfather Arthur's lifelong confidant. He carried a worn leather briefcase, his presence immediately silencing the chaos. "Mr. Thompson, what brings you here at this hour?" my mother asked, her voice trembling, aghast at yet another development in this relentless nightmare. The old lawyer surveyed the scene, with a grave expression before speaking. "I have been activated by an inalienable clause in Mr. Arthur Miller's final will and testament to be executed under the condition of grave peril to the family estate or the use of duress against the primary heir." "You're forging schemes. This is all made up to usurp my mother's rights," Kevin screamed in a panic. The lawyer calmly unrolled a sealed document. "Control yourself, young man. The document stipulates that Mrs. Margaret Miller's control over the estate was a temporary stewardship, not an absolute, irrevocable ownership. I will now read the official deliberation dictated by your grandfather. I, Arthur Miller, declare that all landholdings, the residential property in High Point, and all profits and dividends from Miller Legacy Furniture are granted in a lifetime trust to my daughter, Margaret. However, this trust will be immediately and irrevocably revoked upon evidence of severe internal conflict, psychological or physical harm inflicted upon my grandchildren, or financial ruin brought about by fraud or speculation by my grandson, Kevin. In such an event, all deeds, titles, and governance of all possessions shall be transferred in full, immediately and irrevocably, to Jack Miller, my firstborn grandson." The sentence hung in the air, a silent condemnation that annihilated a kingdom in a single blow. "Mrs. Miller," the lawyer continued, "the evidence of embezzlement and duress provided by Jack activates this clause. As of this moment, he is the sole title holder to this property. Your right to reside here is now subject to his goodwill." The shock of it all was too much. The matriarch who had ruled her family with an iron fist, who believed her will was supreme, had been outmaneuvered by a dead man. My grandfather, with his quiet wisdom, had foreseen her blind favoritism and set a trap, a delayed action failsafe to protect the family from itself. Kevin, in a final, futile act of rage, tried to snatch and destroy the will. I restrained him easily. "It's over, Kevin. Save your energy. Your empire is gone." Jessica, seeing the collapse, was already trying to escape out the back with her stolen goods, a traitor abandoning a sinking ship. My mother watched, her reign completely destroyed, left with nothing but the bitter realization that she had worshipped a false idol, a destructive monster she herself had created. The consequences came swiftly. The police arrived, summoned by the banks to investigate the financial fraud. Kevin was led away in handcuffs, his cries for his brother's mercy echoing in the morning air. My mother collapsed at the officer's feet, begging for her son, offering to take the blame. I gently lifted her up. "Mom, this is his crime to answer for. This isn't about money anymore. This is about the law." The tragicomedy concluded with Jessica being caught by creditors as she tried to load her loot into a car. In the struggle, her suitcases burst open, scattering a ridiculous collection of stolen cash, gold, and cosmetics across the pavement, the cynical plunder of a soulless opportunist. Kevin watched in horror, the final betrayal laid bare. "It's you, Kevin," she screamed, "who ruined everything with your lies and your gambling." My mother, seeing the true nature of the daughter-in-law she had prized for her heir, broke into a fit of hysterical, painful laughter. The empty empire of hypocrisy and false idols had finally crumbled. In the macabre silence of the ruined house, with the creditors gone, the legacy was finally clean. But I had no intention of staying, of breathing the toxic air of betrayal and memory. Still, I couldn't abandon my mother, a broken, gray-haired woman of 70, to her fate. "Mr. Thompson," I instructed, "please arrange for the sale of this house and the company assets. First priority is to pay the employees back wages and the smaller creditors. With whatever remains, please find my mother a modest, quiet house in a small town, somewhere peaceful where she can be safe." My mother, through her tears, asked if I was abandoning her. I sat beside her and took her hand. Mom, I have no desire to live in the shadow of this arrogance. I have my own work, my own life to build. I'm using what's left to clean up this mess, to settle the debts so our family name isn't dragged through the mud any further. I'm setting you up somewhere safe, back in the countryside where you grew up. I will ensure you have a monthly allowance to live comfortably. This is about justice and forgiveness, and maybe, after time, there can be a space for love to return. A wave of cathartic sobs racked her body. I was so wrong, so blind, Jack. Banish the true for the false. Forgive a foolish old mother. I held her, a quiet gesture of peace, as the scars began their long journey toward healing. I finally returned to my paradise in the Blue Ridge Mountains, to Sarah and to Lily, who was already recovering her smile. I left my mother with a farewell gift, a piece of jewelry, a token of a new beginning. I had fulfilled my duty, not just as a son, but as a man of integrity. As I drove away, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror, a sense of peace settled over me. In the years that followed, our life blossomed. Sarah's flower farm, named Teresa's Roses in a nod to a past life, became a local success. My workshop, the Miller Craft, gained a reputation for creating art with soul, training local apprentices in the true craft. Lily grew up happy, surrounded by nature and art, free from the shadows of the past. Every month, a check was sent to a small town, and letters filled with gratitude and repentance would arrive in return. My mother found peace in a simple life, in charity work, and in prayer. Kevin served his time, and upon his release, chastened and humbled, began the slow process of rebuilding his life on honest terms. One snowy Christmas, we drove back for a visit. At the gate of a small, cozy cottage, my mother waited. Lily ran to her, handing her a bouquet, an offering without blame or resentment. The embrace was warm, the tears were of joy. Inside, around a crackling fire, a family, broken and rebuilt, shared a meal. The scars were still there, but they were no longer open wounds. They were reminders of the price of wisdom. That night, watching the firelight dance on the faces of the people I loved, I understood the final lesson of my grandfather's legacy. It wasn't about wood or money. It was about the unshakable strength of a core that is true, that bends in the wind but never breaks, and that, in the end, finds its way back to the light. My life was a testament to that, an honest life, built with my own hands, blooming in the heart of the mountains, a home full and without fear.